Welcome to the Takeaway series on Channelchek. The high-energy 2023 NAB show was the pinnacle event for all in the global broadcast, media, and entertainment industry, in an environment that fostered investment ideas. Noble Capital Markets Director of Research and Senior Media and Entertainment Analyst Michael Kupinski was there. First, you'll get a brief C-suite description of the company. Then Michael will moderate a fireside chat. Enjoy the takeaway from the 2023 NAB show.
Good day, and thank you for joining us. My name is Bill Wilson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Townsquare Media, and I'm going to take the next 7 to 10 minutes and give you an overview of our company. Townsquare is a digital-first oriented company focused on markets outside the top 50 markets in the United States. So we're focused on smaller markets across the US. And we started as a legacy radio company in 2010 with 100% of our revenue being broadcast radio. And fast forward to today, we ended 2022 with 50% of our revenue and 50% of our profits from digital solutions for advertisers. And I'm going to walk you through that. A couple of key stats that you can see on this slide is last year's revenue and EBITDA of $463 million in revenue, $114 million in adjusted EBITDA. 2022 was our best year ever in terms of revenue and profit in the company's history. You can see that we did $231 million in digital net revenue. You can also see that we have exceeded prior COVID levels, so we've higher revenue and higher profit than 2019 at 107% of revenue, 111% of profit. We have a significant digital audience to our own properties. So when I talk about our digital advertising, you're going to hear there's two components. One is monetizing our own audience, and one is a programmatic offering targeting people across all connected devices, no matter where they are. For our owned and operated properties, we're one of the largest producers of original local content in the United States. And you can see a key stat of 71 million people coming to our mobile sites, our websites, our mobile apps each and every month. And we also have a very vibrant subscription business for digital marketing solutions, which I'll touch on. And that is 20% of the company's total revenue and 24% of its profits. And as I noted, one other key thing to recognize is we are really the only local media company, be it outdoor, print, television, radio, that exclusively focuses on markets outside the top 50. And we think that's one of our core strengths, and our differentiations is combination of our digital solutions all being in-house and the fact that we're focused on markets outside the top 50, where we can create really differentiated offerings for the clients in these markets as well as for the audience. Just going to flip through. So here's just a quick snapshot of you from the top. Our digital business, as I noted, $231 million of revenue, almost $70 million in profit. Importantly, our digital businesses are operating at a 30% margin in 2022. And as we shared with investors moving forward, we expect to be operating our businesses in the digital space in the high 20% margin business. So that is a key differentiator for us. That's one of the reasons that 50% of our net income is from our digital solutions. Our digital solutions are comprised of digital advertising, which you can see was $140 million last year, growing at a 20% rate. And then Townsquare Interactive, our digital marketing solutions business, which is the subscription business I just noted, $90 million in revenue, $26 million in profit, growing last year at 11%. And then our legacy cash cow business is our broadcast business. We love our broadcast business. Has a lot of great characteristics, including significant cash flow, very meaningful to the communities that we're operating in outside the top 50 markets. But it is a cash cow, and that means we are not expecting this business to grow over the coming years. We're keeping the margins relatively stable. Again, you can see here in the high 20s, and we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. But our growth engine moving forward, as it has been for the last 5 years, is our digital solutions for clients and our consumers. This just gives you a sense. We resegmented our business 2 years ago to get greater transparency into our digital businesses, because for quite a while we weren't getting credit that our digital businesses were as profitable as they were. So beginning of 2021, we broke that out, and you can see here that the margins, in essence, for our digital business and our legacy cash cow broadcast business are in essence equal. As I noted earlier, I can't stress enough, being outside the top 50 markets is a huge competitive advantage for us. Much less competition, and we're bringing very, very sophisticated digital solutions to smaller markets where there's less competition. And the fact that we have these digital solutions all in-house is a significant advantage as well. And we have heritage sales teams who've been there quite a while. As you're probably aware, the fastest growing part of local media is digital advertising. Digital advertising takes last year 65 cents of every dollar. So 65% of all advertising dollars spent in the US in 2022 were oriented around digital advertising and digital solutions. Only 5% was spent on radio. The experts like S&P Magna and others expect digital to take 75% of all advertising spend by 2027. So clearly our focus on digital since 2010 and becoming a digital first company over the last 5 years has really benefited us well, particularly in these smaller markets where there's less competition. And as you can see, just going back to 2017, 5 short years ago, we were at 100 million in digital revenue. Last year, we grew to $231 million in digital revenue. And as we've shared for a number of years now, our forecast and expectation is $275 million of digital revenue in 2024. And that would be for Townsquare a CAGR of plus 9% over the coming years between 2022 and 2024 to get to that 275. You're probably aware we really stand in a class of our own as it relates to other local media players. Nobody's really close to the 50% digital revenue and even further away from a profit perspective. But you could see Lee Enterprises, the newspaper companies, at 32%. You could see iHeart at 26%, and then others in the TV space in the low 20s like Tegna and Gray. But you can see we're really in a class by ourselves. I think that's attributed to two things: focused on smaller markets and the fact that we built all of these in-house with an amazing product and engineering team. As I mentioned earlier, the fastest growing part of the company for the last several years has been Townsquare Ignite, which is our digital advertising solutions for our owned and operated properties, as well as programmatic. And I noted earlier that grew 20% last year. It's been our fastest growing profit, our fastest growing revenue, and that'll be the case over the next 5 to 10 years as well, given the what I just shared with you about 75% of all digital advertising being digital by 2027. Townsquare Interactive, 90 million, as I mentioned earlier, in revenue, 26 million in profit. Importantly, a subscription business. And we also have a dual sales team. So we use our world-class sales team in our 74 local markets, but we also have a tremendous call center in Charlotte. And we just opened a second location in Phoenix last month in March to really double down in this space, because the market opportunity here we see as $32 billion. And right now we have roughly 30,000 customers, and we see a total addressable market of just under 9 million for our core customers, which are outside the top 50 markets, less than 20 employees and less than 5 million in revenue. So we're doubling down on our investment with the operation in Phoenix open. That'll in essence mirror the size of Charlotte over the next decade, which is well over 600 employees, starting organically a decade ago. As I mentioned, broadcast, great business for us, but it's a cash cow. That's how we're treating it. Our listening trends in terms of audience are stable, and our time spent listening, which is unlike the rest of the industry, is stable as well. So I think that speaks to the fact that as newspapers and television stations have exited smaller markets, we've doubled down our investment in content. And as I noted earlier at the top of this presentation, we're one of the largest producers of original local content providers in the United States at this point, really super serving our communities, and we take great pride in that. The last thing I'll just highlight for you is a couple financials. As I noted, last year was our best revenue year ever. It was also our best profit year ever. We have significant free cash flow, so much so that we just initiated a dividend. We announced that on our Q4 earnings call back in March, and we now have a significant dividend moving forward at 75% annually, 0.1875 quarterly, and that is actually being paid for the first time on May 1st. I just thought I would end up with our guidance for the year, just to give you a sense. If you're new to the story, we have in essence guided for full year revenue ex political anywhere from -2% to +3%. Obviously, we want to give a conservative estimate. My expectation is that we will be flat to up in 2023 on revenue. And in Q1, we guided 0 to +2%. on revenue versus prior year, all in. And then you can see our adjusted EBITDA for the year. We guided conservatively from a -9% ex-political to +1%. And again, I expect that to be flat for the year as well. But we've got a lot of the year left. And with that, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time. I look forward to meeting some of you virtually and in person in the future to learn more about Townsquare. So thank you.
NobleCon 19 at Florida Atlantic University. Located at the center of one of South Florida's most vibrant and fastest growing cities, Boca Raton offers an unparalleled cultural, recreational, educational, and business environment, the perfect setting for NobleCon 19. Now in its 19th year, NobleCon 2023 will be our biggest ever. We're inviting more companies, larger companies, and dramatically expanding the investor representation. And with the move to the FAU College of Business Executive Education, all new, state-of-the-art 50,000 square foot facility, NobleCon is the gold standard on the conference circuit. NobleCon 19 at FAU. It's time to invest in knowledge.
Let's talk a little bit about the NAB show, Bill. Are you a fan of Vegas, by the way?
I am a fan of Vegas. I'm not a gambler, but great restaurants, great retail. So I am a fan of Vegas.
Maybe I could teach you how to play a little blackjack a little later.
I look forward to that.
I'll see you around there. There's a lot going on this year at the NAB, and certainly there's a buzz about AI and how radio stations can use AI to develop content, new technologies, some new services. What is driving you to participate this year, aside from your duties as the radio board chair of the NAB? What are you looking to take away from the NAB this year?
Yeah, I think there's tremendous panels this year that have been set up by the NAB. So I think it's going to be hard sometimes to attend all of them because some of them are over at the same time. But I think the speakers and the panelists are outstanding this year. And as you noted, the topics from a technology standpoint and innovation and transforming local media space, I think, are incredibly important. Obviously, AI is on top of everybody's head right now and their tongue, and just what the transformation there we could talk more about. But obviously, in-car technology is accelerating quite a bit. In essence, the windshield is looking to be almost going to be taking over your screen, particularly with automation coming in automobiles. So I think the technology piece of the NAB for radio and television broadcasters, I think, is tremendously valuable. And the exhibitors they have this year, it's great to see. Last year was a successful show, but the number of participants from a attendee perspective and exhibitor perspective is far exceeding last year. So I expect a very high energy NAB conference this year, and looking forward to attending a lot of the sessions and seeing our exhibitors.
Bill, what do you see as the pressing issues for the radio industry? Deregulation, digital transition, streaming? I mean, what do you see are the biggest issues driving?
Yeah, I think from a one perspective is diversification of revenue. Regardless of what that is, I think given the characteristics of radio, and radio is taking 5% of all advertising dollars, and even in the TV space with cord cutting, I think it's really important for local media companies to have a diversification strategy, particularly potentially away from their legacy business for future growth. That could be digital like it is for Townsquare, that could be events, that could be a number of other things for different companies. But from an advocacy standpoint and just the future, I think it's incredibly important just to have a level playing field, and things like deregulation and the fact that we're capped with the number of stations that we can have in a market where you've got Spotify or Pandora or XM or Netflix, or you pick your choice of a competitor who have none of these limitations. It just doesn't feel like an equal fight. Obviously, things like the performance tax and other things come into play. Those things are the most important to me. Is let's just have a level playing field. The regulations that the radio industry in particular are held to are literally 20 years old, and look what's happened over the past 20 years. So it's taken a little slow to get there, but I'm hoping over the next 2 to 3 years that we can progress on the regulation front to really make it an equal playing field.
Well, the FCC chairwoman is expected to present at the NAB, but you're not expecting that this administration is going to be lifting any deregulations, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't expect that right now in this administration. And obviously with Gigi stepping out of the nomination process, the first step I think is going to be, who fills that seat. And that's incredibly important. But I don't expect anything to happen until the next election cycle. I think something should, because I think it's so obvious that it's antiquated. But I think realistically from a regulation and how it's going to work, it's going to be a few years out. But I do honestly believe that it's a matter of when, not if, because I can't imagine still being held to these limitations 4, 5, 6 years from now. It's just inconceivable to me.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the other pressing issues. There's some recent chatter about auto manufacturers no longer including AM on the dashboard. What are your thoughts about this prospect? I know it's been, out there for many, many years. Will it happen? And how will this affect Townsquare if it did come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real possibility. Clearly, there's a number of electric vehicles that are already don't have AM in the car. There's others who have speculated that that's not going to happen. It would be a real shame just because the number of Americans listening to AM radio literally every day and every week are significant to the size of the population. And importantly, this is where a number of emergency alerts like the EAS system, and anytime there's a disaster, so many people are tuning into AM radio. So I don't think it should happen. Could it happen? Yes. Do I think it'll happen over the next 10 years? No. But at the end of the day, everybody should be prepared. Like I personally am paranoid about things, so I like to be prepared in case things go in a direction that we don't prefer to go. So if it were to go away, I think it's important for everybody to have a strategy for in the car. So for Townsquare, you had asked what that would mean for Townsquare if it did happen. We have so much listenership now through our app. And the majority of people who get into a car today, the first thing they do is take their phone and they plug it in. And when you plug in a phone and your apps are integrated with Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, or whatever else is to come, the apps then come on the dashboard, and you can use things like voice control, your steering wheel control to control the app. So we have data now that shows more and more people are listening to us in the car through our apps, which is great. So if AM radio went away, quite honestly, some people talk about FM going away as well, and consumers in essence opting in with a subscription like they do with XM for AM FM radio or for other apps in their car in the future. I think that that's a possibility, and therefore you need to have a strategy for distribution into the car, not relying on the auto manufacturer. And that's what we've been doing for quite some time. And the side benefit is you get a lot more information on the consumer who's listening to you. We're obviously with an AM FM broadcast, you can get some information, but it's limited as compared to what you can get from a digital stream.
It seems really odd to me because, AM stations, many of them are clear channel stations, which mean that, they cover a large amount of service territory, and that they serve there as a public service in case there's a disaster and so forth. So it just seems kind of odd to me that the government, who really mandated these clear channel stations, are now saying, would allow something like that to happen. It just seems odd.
Yeah, and to be clear, Michael, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I honestly don't think that's going to happen. There's already been some discussion with congressmen and senators about the peril of that happening, to your point around natural disasters and emergency alerts and all of that. So I do not expect that to happen. I think it would be a tragedy if it did happen, and I don't expect it to happen. My comments were more that if it did happen, what are the ways that people will be prepared from an industry perspective? Because I believe, to your point, if somebody made a grave mistake and it did go away, consumers would still need and want it. And therefore they would download the app, and when they get in the car, or if they're using Alexa at home and other things like that, they'd still be able to get it even if it's not built into the car. With that said, I expect it to be built into the car for decades and decades to come.
As you indicated in your earlier presentation, you said that radio listenership has been relatively stable over the past several years. And for other station groups, the amount of time listening has somewhat declined. How much of the radio listenership has actually come from digital streaming?
Yeah, so Couple things. I think one thing to highlight, and then I'll get into your specific question, is over the last 5 years, radio has become the #1 reach medium in the United States. So, 5 years ago, television was the #1 reach medium. Today, radio is in the mid 90, 95, 90%, 93% of all Americans listen to radio on a weekly basis. Obviously, with TV and cord cutting, television's gone down quite a bit. Radio, from a reach perspective, has actually remained stable for the last 10 years, which is quite incredible, and I think speaks to the how important radio, particularly local content is to consumers. The challenge, as you noted, is that time spent listening for the industry has been going down for the last 5 years. For Townsquare, thankfully, I think because we're in these smaller markets outside the top 50, our listenership in terms of time spent listening has been incredibly stable. But as an industry, it's gone down. So to your question about streaming, for the industry, that's approaching 20%. I think right now for the industry at large, it's about 16%. For us, it's in the 20 to low 20%. I expect that to continue to grow, and it's been growing quite nicely over the last several years. As I discussed earlier, more and more people listening via the app. And particularly in cars, more and more people plugging in their phone and listening through their Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. The other thing we've seen, the fastest growing part of our listenership has actually been Alexa devices and Google Home. In essence, over the last 4 years, we've been able to put radio back front and center into the home, where if you asked most people if they had a transistor radio in their home 5 years ago, most would say no, where today, more and more people have these devices, and it's a huge majority. So today we're in the low 20s. As an industry, we're in the mid-teens. I expect that to double over the next 4 years, just because of this proliferation of all these technologies and ease of listening, it's great to be able to walk in and say to Alexa, I want to listen to New Jersey 101.5, and all of a sudden, there you go, you're listening instantaneously.
I do that every day. And I know another radio executive believed that radio listening over the next 5 years, digital streaming will account for more than 50%. And it sounds like you would probably agree with that.
Yeah, I think directionally, definitely. It's just like, will we reach 50%? Yes. Will it grow past 50%? I believe so. Just because it's becoming such an ease of use, as I just described, the proliferation of these devices that make it so easy, the fact that you can plug in your phone and be able to do that, particularly with automation in the car coming. I don't know if that's 4 years out, 6 years out, in terms of not even have to actively drive. People are going to be doing a lot of other things while they're in transport, and the fact that you can then just say to the car, hey, I'm going to read the newspaper and I want to listen to this station and just speak to the car, just like we're seeing in the home. I think that'll just continue. So 50% within 5 years, I think is definitely possible.
So we alluded to the fact that there's a lot of chatter, particularly around the NAB, about artificial intelligence and chat GBT. How does the company plan to embrace new technology, and what areas do you believe offer the most opportunities by using artificial intelligence and chat GBT?
Yeah, this is an area that personally I'm the most excited about, not only for Townsquare, but just the industry at large, and the industry meaning just all industries. The implications of this, I think, are not well known yet, and obviously I can't foresee everything, but I think it's going to be like the Industrial Revolution. I just think this is such a dramatic change for all businesses, and we're not even in the first inning. We're in the pre-innings, so to say. I see we're already using it from a back-end engineering technology standpoint. We've been testing it in other areas around things like writing code. We've been using it for even commercials, in terms of, rather than starting from scratch. We've been using it quite a bit for ideation. I would call it in the beta phase, but I think the implications over the next 5 years cannot be understated. I think it's going to dramatically change in so many ways. Obviously, there's certain companies in the broadcasting space who are providing AI for audio, meaning, I'm sure you're aware, with version 4.0, you could record your voice for several minutes, and then you could give a script transcribed, and your voice will perfectly speak to that. There's a song going around today that was created over the weekend with AI, a copy of Jay-Z, and no Jay-Z fan would know that it's not Jay-Z, yet it's not Jay-Z. So just think about the implications that of all businesses, including radio, television, and others. I cannot stress how profound that is, and As you noted here in Vegas, it's a hot button, a hot topic. Imagine what that's going to be 12 months from now at the next conference and the next conference. So couldn't be more excited in many ways for our industry, the industry at large, and for Townsquare. I have no doubt that it's going to create scalability, efficiency, so many opportunities for us to continue our digital growth and transformation.
Let's turn to your digital businesses, because that is an exciting part of the company. You mentioned that 50% of the business is digital, and what's really interesting, 50% of the profits. I mean, that's unique among all of your peers, because most of these companies don't operate at margins similar to their digital businesses, operate at margins similar to the broadcast businesses. So obviously your digital first strategy has worked. Can you talk a little bit about Townsquare Interactive? You indicated that grew double digits during the COVID lockdowns, and now we're starting to see a little softness, and certainly not growing as the rate it was in the past. Do you feel like maybe there's something different that's happening versus what we saw in the lockdowns and previous cycles, something different that's happening that in maybe some of these local markets that you're in that might be different than past cycles?
Yeah, definitely. So, I have shared in our investor presentation for the last probably 3 years, if not longer at this point, that Townsquare Interactive in particular targets smaller clients, not only clients outside the top 50 markets, but clients with less than 20 employees, less than 5 million in revenue. So obviously those are, relatively small businesses compared to, hospitals and auto dealers and others in that space. So to your point, during COVID, all of these businesses were impacted across the board. But if you were a restaurant with less than 5 million in revenue, if you were a retail shop with less than 5 million in revenue, you were highly impacted. You may have actually even been shut down and you transferred to delivery or other mechanisms over time in 2020. But it was very defined, and the consumer, there was a pent-up demand for these things, but there was obviously people were secluded because they weren't necessarily going out and doing what they normally do. And on top of that, the government, for all of these small businesses and even larger businesses, created an influx of support with the PPE program, and they did that 3 times, twice in 2020, once in 2021. So there was an infusion of funds to help these businesses during this really difficult time. And as we shared, we even grew during COVID, and we helped our clients in this situation where when they were either shut down for a period of time or impacted significantly, we gave them discounts. We gave some of them free months based on what businesses and how they were impacted. So now it's different, and it's really been different since the fall, I'd say, and particularly in Q4, and even you heard others in the industry just at large, some of the struggles from a macro environment as we entered 2023, and we still face that to some degree, is much higher wages, high inflation. So cost of doing business. If you're a restaurant, you couldn't pass on all of the expense of food. You saw eggs triple in price, everything increase in price. And that's why obviously the Fed is raising interest rates, which is also impacting these businesses and their ability to get loans and do so at a rate that they could pay. So it is a very, very different business condition for those with less than 5 million in revenue in 2023 and the end of 22 than COVID. And that's why you're seeing in, in my annual shareholder letter for Townsquare and our last earnings call, which was literally, I think just a month ago on March 9th, we shared that we expect Townsquare Interactive in the first half of the year, in essence, to have flat revenue because of these conditions that these businesses are facing. And then as we come out of this, if that's, Q4, if that's Q1, time will tell based on if the Fed pauses in the back half of the year, do they pause and then reduce at some point? No one knows that, or I sure don't know that. And when that happens, I fully expect Townsquare Interactive to return to not only the 10 million in revenue that they generated every year on average of the last 6 years and 3 million in profit. I expect that to accelerate. So, you can argue if this is the right decision or not, but we've made the decision, even in this environment where Townsquare Interactive, we don't plan to grow revenue for the time being. We're doubling down on our investment. As I noted, I think as earlier when we were talking, we just opened the Phoenix location, and we expect that to mirror the size of Charlotte over the next decade. We've already got over 30 employees at this point, and we expect to add 30 more this year there. So we still go back to the addressable market being 32 billion, just under 9 million businesses outside the top 50 markets with less than 5 million in revenue. And we're running after that. So our sales velocity is quite strong. It's just that these businesses continue to be challenged, and many of them were going out of business because of the inflation, high wage, and other conditions they're meeting. And Townsquare Interactive is having a temporary adjustment with that. With that said, we're also taking the opportunity to look at and say, how do we grow out of this even stronger than we went into it? And just like we did during COVID, I'm very, very confident whatever slowdown we have in Townsquare Interactive, just like we had for the whole company in 2020, 2021, we came out of it, had our best year ever in terms of profit. 2022, we grew on that and had our best year ever in terms of revenue and profit. So I expect fully that Townsquare Interactive will see that in coming out of this. If that's 2024, if that's back half of 24 into 25, I don't necessarily know exactly when, but I know it will happen.
Your programmatic business, Ignite, seems to be still growing very strongly. What's driving the current favorable revenue trends there? Can you just talk a little bit about the runway you see for that business?
Yeah, couldn't be more excited. As it's our fastest growing part of our company for the last 3 years now is our digital advertising, Townsquare Ignite. It's really two-pronged. We have significant engagement and audience growth on our owned and operated, one of the largest producers of original local content in the United States, particularly as TV and newspapers really exit markets outside the top 50, which is terrible for Americans. We're in essence serving a really vital mission to create informative and entertaining and trustworthy information for these 74 cities that we operate in. And then obviously on the programmatic side, we've built technology for the last 6 years and have a great tech stack where we in essence see, for all intents and purposes, all of the inventory on the internet. It's over, just under 100%. And we're able to target people down to really the IP address on a Hulu, or Roku or Fire Stick. So it's incredibly, incredibly effective for the advertiser and the client. Obviously, last year, 65% of all advertising went to digital solutions. That's expected to be 75% by 2027. So clearly, we're benefiting from where the water is flowing. But then when you factor in, we do this all in-house. That's one of our special differentiators from 2010 is, our programming and engineering and product team and all in-house who built all of these products from Ignite to our content management system to Townsquare Interactive. The things they build and see by sitting down with clients is quite impressive. So as you noted, we're growing there, mid-teens. And that brings us back to, for Townsquare, we've said by 2024, for full year, we'll be at about 275 million in digital revenue, which implies a 9% growth rate over the next 2 years. So that's what I expect, high single-digit growth rate in digital. Even in this time of macro uncertainty, our digital business from an advertising standpoint is thriving.
So the stock has held up nicely in spite of some recent declines in the radio valuations in the industry. That's possibly due to the fact that you initiated this hefty dividend. At least when it was announced, the annualized yield was over 10%. What do you say to investors that would have preferred maybe to see a little bit more aggressive debt reduction strategy, given this uncertain economic outlook? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I may not share this perspective of holding up well. I mean, it's outperforming others in the industry. That's fair, and I appreciate that acknowledgement. But when you think about our stock, a year ago was just under $13. In Q4 of 21, it was close to $15, if not over $15.
Still undervalued.
Right. So and since that time, what's happened, right? So last year we had our best revenue and best profit ever, and we had our lowest leverage ever, and we're obviously significantly discounted from where we were last year. I don't know if we're trading at around 8.5. So we don't think we're not satisfied with that, and I think the reason we are lower than we were a year ago, even though we have greater performance, greater profits, greater growth, is because of this macro uncertainty and potentially the industry at large, where people don't yet perceive us as a digital first company. And sometimes first impression, or if you start as a radio company, it takes longer to get credit for what you are today. And I think that's part of the piece. As it relates to the dividend, listen, we ended the year roughly 43 million, I think, in cash, a little over 40 million in cash in 2022. We had bought $20+ million in bonds roughly at a discount in 2022. We delevered down to about 4.29%, lowest leverage, net leverage in the company's history, as well as total leverage. And yet we weren't getting the credit. And we really wanted to reward our shareholders who've been with us since we went public in 2014. And we initiated this dividend, as you noted, at its 10% yield when it was announced. It's high single digits now. And it's $13 million a year for us. And when you think about how much free cash flow we generate on an annualized basis, we're obviously extremely confident that we could support this dividend for years and years and years, if not decades, as we continue to grow. Because even during COVID in 2020, when we took down our EBITDA and continued to invest and didn't do RIFs or furloughs like others, we were still cash flow positive. So we're rewarding our shareholders, and we're pleased to do so. And since it's been announced a month ago, quite honestly, the influx of new investors who are seeing the dividend, but then taking time to understand more about the company and what our strategy has been very, very exciting for me personally. Just the conversations we're having that, quite honestly, we weren't having prior to that. For whatever reason, the dividend has sparked not only people looking at it from a yield perspective, just as importantly, if not more importantly, the underlying transformation of Townsquare into a digital first company and all of those attributes. So, what I say to those people who like, why initiate a dividend? Why not just delever? The reality is we're doing both. Right. We're just as we've done in 2022, our expectation is we'll continue to delever. We're able to buy bonds in the open market today, trading around 94, 95 on the dollar. And we also look at if our stock is where it is, or even where it was prior to this macro uncertainty a year from now, we would also look to do a buyback. We bought back a significant part of the company from Oaktree. It was 2 years ago on the day we had our earnings call on March 9th. And quite honestly, we didn't really get much credit for that either when you look at it. So I think it's a matter of just continuing to stay focused, be disciplined on our digital strategy, our strategy outside the top 50 markets, continue to love and appreciate the broadcast business, but recognize it for what it is, which is a cash cow. And I actually think the dividend is going to be a great thing for not only our current investors, but our future investors. And they'll also see us delever along the way. So it doesn't preclude us from delevering. We're sitting on a significant amount of cash at the end of the year. And I have no idea how long this uncertainty is going to last. But just like COVID, I'm very confident that as these clouds lift, we are going to be one of the best, if not the best performing local media companies.
I scratch my head all the time about why your stock valuation is trading below radio peers with this awesome digital business and growth driver that you have there. The dividend closed the gap a little bit, but there's still a gap, and I struggle to understand that. But
I think it's twofold. One thing is, I think people, when I talk to investors who, some of them look at being outside the top 50 markets as a competitive disadvantage. Oh, wouldn't you want to be in the top 50 markets? Obviously, we had the opportunity to do that with acquisitions along the last 5 years. It's such a competitive, I can't stress it enough, that what a competitive advantage being in these markets and meaning so much to our audience and meaning so much to our clients. We are now the marketing agencies, the marketing consultants for these businesses in these smaller markets. And, our goal internally is, and we say, treat our clients like your friends. And if you help their business grow, you're going to have a lifelong partner. So I think that's why some people, to your point, we're trading below the radio peer group when no one's close to us in revenue, profit and revenue on the digital front. And I think the good news is, as long as we continue to execute and stick to our principles, over time, it completely becomes undeniable. Is that today? Is that 2 years from now? Only time will tell.
Well, Bill, that's all we have time for. I hope to see you maybe at a restaurant, maybe even at the tables. We'll see. And so have a great show at the NAB.
Thank you so much. And I'll take you up on the offer to teach me some gambling, and I'll see you at the tables.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
With more than 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple, then Channelchek truly is your trade. It's an investor community where you can access independent Wall Street research, advanced market data, balanced news, corporate videos, and podcasts. You can even register to attend in-person Meet the Management Series luncheons and to be part of the preeminent annual Small and Microcap Investor Conference, NobleCon. And here's the best news. Since Channelchek is sponsored by the featured companies, premium membership requires no investment. It's absolutely free. So check it out. Log in today. Find out why Channelchek is North America's leading source of research on the companies that just may change the world.